broadly, the two broad things I'm going to talk about is what's currently happening in the private payer market in Canada. A couple interesting trends I think you would want to hear about as we talk about pharmacare reform going forward. And then I'll give you my thoughts on some principles that I think should inform any kind of pharmacare reform that we're going to do in Canada going forward. First thing I want to do is position drug coverage within the broader supplementary health package, because at the end of the day, and I think this is important for a couple of different reasons, insurers don't sell drug coverage to employers, and in their turn, employers aren't putting in place drug plans. They're putting in place employee benefit plans, and in all cases is going to be much broader than just the drugs. And it's going to represent all of the types of things that you see up there on the screen. Drugs is about 37% of a typical spend. If we look at the industry data, it would represent about 37% of the spend for an entire employee plan. And dental care would be a close second. Now, there was some discussion earlier today about tax incentives and the tax incentive for drugs. I think it's important to note that those are for supplementary health benefits. If we want to start talking about eliminating that, that's a discussion to be had at a policy level, but the implications will be much larger than drugs, and we've seen evidence of that in Quebec. There's things to think through. There'll be impacts on dental coverage and other things as well. So for the $2 billion in spend, you get about a $27 billion payback from employers. I would say that's not too bad. From a payer perspective, insurers are actually quite unique in that we're trying to offer a national service within a very siloed and heterogeneous market in Canada. On the drug side alone, there are 14 different plans that we need to coordinate with, okay? Each with their own formulary, each with their approach to listing drugs, each with their own approach to how we coordinate, etc. Now, it's true not only for the drug side, but every other benefit you'd offer an employer is the same, okay? On the paramedical side, drastic differences provincially. If you look at massage therapy, we were talking about that earlier today. It's regulated here in BC, relatively easy to administer in this province. In Quebec, there are somewhere between 30 and 50 massage therapy associations. We actually can't quite get a handle on that. Trying to adjudicate in that kind of environment is very challenging. Dental, 12 different dental associations, 12 different dental fee codes, 12 different timelines at which these costs are updated, etc. All of that variability drives cost, it drives complexity, and in turn drives some of the administrative costs that insurers have to incur in order to manage within that kind of environment. So standardization across Canada in healthcare in general, and certainly within the drug plans, would have good positive knock-on benefits for private carriers from a cost perspective and a simplicity perspective. I'm going to talk specifically about drugs now for the rest of my presentation. The question of what role does private insurance play in Canada on drug coverage actually varies quite dramatically by province. And you can think of it as being our role being the least important in the west and growing in importance as you head east. And this chart actually shows that trend very, very neatly. And these differences are driven purely by the different provincial plans and provincial structures that are in place. The insurers supplement those. We fit in where there's gaps and where people want to buy supplemental coverage. But how we do that varies quite dramatically across the country. Let's talk about some of the changes that have been occurring in the industry. And there's, I'd say for about 20 years prior to the last 5 years, our industry was a pretty staid one, pretty minor change. We were insurers. We sort of liked it that way. The last 5 to 6 years have been, I would characterize as very dramatic change. It's happening on the back office and it's happening on the front office. I'll cover a bit of both of those for you now. Back office. Roughly 80% of drug claims are adjudicated electronically now. And what that essentially means is that the adjudication process is a commodity. It has been outsourced to PBMs, as Art was referring to. All of the private carriers have done that, okay? And what you're getting then is enormous scale within a handful of very sophisticated IT PBMs who can do the adjudication very quickly and very easily. And one of the interesting trends is that the public plans are moving in that same direction, and in a lot of cases are actually using exactly the same PBMs to adjudicate the public plans. There's been a very important, I think, back office quiet harmonization that's been occurring. And that has implications for reform. I think we need to understand this a little bit more and what's happening there and some of the impacts on assumptions around cost savings if we're to rejig things, because a lot of it has already been pulled out, I would argue. Front office. So there's been significant focus by insurers on this in the last 4 or 5 years. designing what we would call drug plan management solutions for clients. So designing them, setting up the back office to adjudicate them, training the sales force to effectively sell these things, develop communication tools out to the employers. And all of the things that you see there listed, I won't go through them, but can be incorporated by essentially any insurer in Canada today for an employer who wants to take advantage of them. So this is relatively new, and it's been a significant change in the marketplace. And there's actually a lot more collaboration happening within the industry now. The most notable one is the launch of the Drug Pooling Corporation, which happened on January 1st of this year. There have been literally tens of thousands of employers moved onto this new platform. Literally millions of Canadians are going to start to benefit from this going forward. Obviously, the benefits are going to accrue down the road, but it was pretty impressive to see the industry coalesce around the need to do something. There's a lot of work happening now around changes to coordination of benefit guidelines, and there's actually quite a bit of, I think, cohesion around the need for us to do things on our own to help move things forward. And executives, are really backing this up with action too. I was talking with an executive of one of our member companies about 6 months ago, and he was saying that at the start of 2010, they had identified that they had what they would consider to be a sort of a Cadillac plan that incorporated the best in class of all of these cost-saving measures. The unfortunate thing was there were only 4 clients who were taking advantages of that plan within their portfolio. So they identified their 17 largest employers, they put together an executive calling plan with specialized collateral support, and they went out and they made a concerted effort to push with those 17 employers to say, look, you guys are in an open plan right now, you need to move to this more managed formula, here are the benefits, this is why it's important, and they made a real effort to go and do that. Now, at the end of 12 months of effort, does anyone want to guess how many employers made the switch? Because I know the 0. Okay, 0. It's as frustrating for the insurance executive as it is for the people in this room that there's not more movement in this direction. Okay? Why is that? Well, the kinds of things we're talking about here have employee impacts, and they have direct employee impacts. And you need to situate that discussion with an HR manager within the economic context that we've been living in since at least 2008. Typically, you're going to have had experienced salary cutbacks, potentially layoffs. There have been dramatic changes to the retirement benefit plans and the funding schemes there. You've had DB plans closed to employees. Retirement benefits have been called back. And then you couple that with drug costs that essentially have been flat, right? Like 2012, drug costs grew at about 0.5%. So the pressure on drugs has gone down, pressure on employees has remained. There's huge reticence to change. And it's been a struggle for everyone to get employers to move more quickly. But when you survey them, they say they're considering doing it. And so we know that at some point there likely is that tipping point, there is that inflection point where we're going to see some big change. So people are getting geared up to be prepared for when that happens. I struggled with whether to put this slide in, but I suspected we were going to hear some discussion around cost management today, and I did want to address this head on. There is a perception that because the way ASO plans are paid, that there's insurers out there inflating cost, or that we're not keeping an eye on the ball on cost. And this is a bit of a head scratcher for those of us in the industry, to be quite honest. That's simply not the way it works. ASO plans are extremely sophisticated, have extremely sophisticated advisors with them, and it's a very competitive market. There are 24 insurers that offer supplementary coverage in this country. And besides all that, and you would expect me to say that as the industry advocate, obviously, but we simply don't see any evidence of that in the data. There's no sustained increase in cost for private payers over public in this Canada over any reasonable period in the past. Okay? I think that whole notion needs to be put to bed. Okay, so quickly, future role of private insurance. I would argue that the optimal solution to any issue, economic issue, is never going to be an extreme one of total deregulation, let the private sector handle it, nor is it ever going to be 100% government funded, 100% government provided. Those extremes will result in a system of some kind, but I don't think they're ever going to be optimal. The optimal system is going to be a mixed one. It's going to leverage the strengths of both the private and public sector. And I also say here that the private insurers will continue to play a role in Canada. I think that's, in some ways, a given. So I think it's incumbent on us to be constructive in our discussions around this issue. It's instructive for us to, good public policy starts from where you're at and moves forward. And I think this is a good forum, but I think we need to maybe get a little bit more specific in some of the things we're looking for out of a national Pharmacare program, which everyone would agree we do need to make some move on. So it does beg the question, right, what are the relative strengths of public and private payers? And I'm not going to go through each of these. There's no magic to these. I just wrote these down myself based on my experience managing in both sectors, to be perfectly honest. But I would argue the system that's going to work best is the one that's going to say, what's the outcome we're looking for? Let's look for the structure that's going to pull the best from both and the strengths from both public and private sector, and to knit it together into an actual system that works for patients. Okay? We focus a little bit too much in Canada on public versus private. I think it's a bit of a distraction, to be perfectly honest. So, summary of my key points. Insurers operate nationally in a very heterogeneous and siloed market. That drives a lot of complexity. It drives a lot of cost. Anything that can be done to standardize is going to start to pull those costs out, and that's a good thing. There's been dramatic change in the back office and dramatic change in the front office in the private payer market in Canada. That's going to continue. Our track record on cost is strong, and it will continue to be strong. And I think we are looking forward to a discussion on what the optimal system for Pharmacare is going to be in Canada. I think it needs to leverage the strengths of both. And I'll look forward to your questions. Thank you.